The mission of Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center is to reduce the trauma to children that have experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, witnessed to violence, or witnessed to a traumatic event. I can't imagine how much time it takes to do some of those. We work as a team so that the child does not have to be interviewed several times. We want to do the interview one time, and then every part of the investigation team go out and do their part of the investigation to ensure that the child is safe and that we can start to heal. We have worked really hard in the last 8 years to ensure the best possible care for our clients and our children. In the last 8 years, we have increased our efforts in prevention. If we can prevent these things from happening to children, we would much rather do that than have to do the forensic interviews. In terms of prevention, we help allocate funds for programs called Teen Lures and Child Lures, and they're given to all of the kids in Boone County. So that's about 12,500 kids that receive that programming. And that programming empowers them to know it's okay to say no to unwanted touches and that they can get help. They can ask for help. They can tell a trusted adult what's going on. When you're riding your scooter and you start at the white line, tell me all about that. Obviously, we've done the forensic interviews for the 8 years, but another piece that was very important to us was to ensure that the aftercare and the mental health care of our clients was the best possible. So we have linkage agreements with several mental health facilities in Boone County, but one of the main ones is Integrative Wellness, and they are co-located with us. They are downstairs, and those therapists are specially trained in trauma-informed care, and they can see our children after this process has happened and start the road to healing.
We hear this all the time, children are our future, but we know how many children are hurting and how many children need everyone around to be a voice for them. And I'm passionate about that, whatever it takes to help. And it's just part of, I love children and I love seeing them smile and happy and grow in a positive way.
Courage.
Kind of my worst nightmare.
To transform terror to grace.
We had a home invasion, and this has been 6 or 7 years ago, probably 6.5 years ago, and it was quite traumatic. We had 6 guys break in our home, and it was a 2-hour ordeal. They pretty much destroyed our home. They violated my daughter and I pretty severely. I was shot a couple times. We weren't sure we were going to survive the night. And I made the decision and said at the hospital and to my husband, I don't remember this so much, but my husband says it quite often, we're going to make something good out of this, because otherwise it's just a terrible situation and nobody wins.
Talk about faith, family, friends.
6 young guys went to prison forever, and we were in a pretty terrible place for a while. I knew that I had to give back to other people because we got so much support at that time from the community and friends and all around our church community. But I know not everybody gets that, and especially children who don't necessarily have a voice to be there for them. So I know that one of the things here are so good about helping kids and doing things in such a confidential way that kids can feel empowered and they don't have to necessarily speak in front of the person who's been abusing them. And so I love the way Sylvia's Place operates, and I want to support them in any way I can. And this is the community I taught in for many years, so it always feels like home when I come into Lebanon.
I've known Eileen for years. We have known each other in many different realms, the school and things like that. But when Eileen came to me and wanted to join the board of directors and wanted to become an advocate, and one of her words were that I want to make sure that everything we went through, that a child has the most support possible. And so she joined our board to continue to support us. And she shares her story as an adult.
I think we get one chance on this earth, and it is part of our responsibility to take care of others. It's just how I feel. I feel very strongly that my role is not just to enjoy life on my own terms, but it's to be there for other people, and kids in particular. I just have a real passion for.
We work together a lot as a team to ensure everyone is okay and everyone is checking in emotionally to ensure that we can continue to do this work, because it is very important work. We try very hard to support each other, and we also give each other some inspiration through quotes and books and different things. But one of our favorites is a quote by Franklin Roosevelt. We may not be able to prepare the future for our children, but we can at least prepare our children for the future.
Good evening. My name is Cassie Frazier, and I'm the Executive Director of Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center. I've worked in the field of child protection and counseling for over 20 years. I will be serving as a facilitator on our first ever Boone County Town Hall on the prevention of child abuse. I want to thank the City of Lebanon for giving us this beautiful space and access to technology today. And we want the audience to leave tonight with a better understanding of our child protection teams, how the pandemic has affected our services, and what each of you can do to prevent and educate people on child abuse. Each participant's information will be posted at a link under the comment section of the YouTube video. Please be mindful of the time, as we want everybody to have the opportunity to share this important information. Please welcome our Boone County Town Hall panel, and I will begin by having each of you introduce yourself, tell me your role, and how long you've been in that role. So we'll start with Mr. Eastwood.
My name is Ken Eastwood. I'm the County Prosecutor. I've served in that role for the past 2 years. Prior to that, I was a Deputy Prosecutor for approximately 20 years.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nabushe Mamba Harding, and I'm with the Department of Child Services here in Boone County. I've been with DCS for 10 years and in Boone County for 5.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Toby Stark, and I work to prevent child sexual abuse predominantly in amateur youth sports by providing trainings and working on policies and procedures. But more importantly, 10 years ago, so when Cassie had the vision to bring prevention to Boone County, I had the honor of working with her to do that, and that relationship still continues with the Indiana Center for the Prevention of Abuse and Suicide.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynette Clark, and I'm the Director for Integrative Wellness. We have been in Boone County since 2013. I've been in the field of mental health and addiction for about 20 years and have been working in Boone County since 2005.
Thank you.
I'm Becky McClure. I am with the Boone County Guardian Ad Litem CASA program. I am the Executive Director. I have been with the program for 12 years now, and it is a separate program from the Department of Child Services and from Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center, so we can explain that more later.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining me today. I'm very excited to be able to get the word out about prevention and then the resources we have in Boone County. So first we're going to talk about some trends. COVID has really hit everybody, and it's hit everybody in different ways. So I would like to ask, we'll start with Mr. Eastwood. What trends have you observed over the last year since we have been sheltering in place?
Well, one of the trends that's been kind of actually troubling is the increase, not only in juvenile crime, but in juvenile victimization. Partly we thought we might see dips in crime or dips in reporting, and because the children were not being seen by as many different people. They weren't going to school as much. However, that really hasn't been the case. We haven't seen the dip as much as we anticipated. Juvenile crime has exploded in the last year, and in the last 6 months at the CAC, we've done more interviews than we ever have in this last 6-month period. So that is a troubling trend. We also look at partially we look at also the growth overall in Boone County in the terms of a number of the juvenile population. Boone County is one of the fastest growing communities in the state, And in fact, I believe our juvenile population has grown between 2013 and 2018 by 8%, which is the highest in the state. The next highest is like 4%. So we're going to see a volume increase coming as we go forward.
Boo, do you think those trends are the same in DCS, or what are you seeing?
Similar to what Mr. Eastwood said, with Indiana being a mandatory reporting state, we hear frequently from the professions who have regular contact with their children. That includes our teachers, mental and medical professionals, and our law enforcement. However, educators and school staff are DCS's #1 report source, and when children were out of school for most of last year, we did see a drop in reports due to them being our #1 report source. When children went to virtual schooling, it became much more difficult for teachers to assess whether they might be victims of abuse or neglect. And even though those calls did drop for the DCS in 2020, our local office saw an increase in domestic violence and child mental health reports.
And we have seen that across the board. Actually, I will go ahead and jump into Lynette. Lynette, in terms of the mental health that Ms. Harding was just talking about, could you give us some of your trends that you've observed over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a lot more requests for services across the board, primarily in anxiety, depression, stress, but also grief and loss. So with this pandemic, people are truly losing people. But not only that, the grief and loss that we express or experience when we aren't able to do normal traditions. So last year at the end of school year, there was so much where kids just had to abruptly stop, and teachers too, for that matter. They didn't get the traditional graduation or potentially, their last day of school and things like that. So just a lot of absenteeism, lack of social interaction, and for our teens, that's their main support is being able to be social with their friends. And so when that goes away, it becomes more challenging. We're grateful and appreciative of all the virtual capabilities we have, but it is no replacement for face-to-face.
Ms. McClure, what does your role look like in the last year?
So my role, I run a volunteer program. We currently have 51 active volunteers, 8 of which are men, which is a world's record for Boone County. We have served over 100 children in the last year. And the funny thing is, I looked at my statistics, and even through COVID, because my volunteers are so concerned about the children that are in the care of DCS and that we're involved with, we had more contact hours as a whole program than we had for the last 2 years. So they were able to virtually stay with their child and make sure that the child was safe and was, getting the services they needed, be it virtually. We helped some kids get some computers that were having internet issues with what they had. So while we were home-based, we still were out there and reaching the children and making that important contact so that those kids had one consistent person that they knew was going to be there.
So everybody that I've talked to so far has talked about after the fact, after something's happened. But Ms. Stark is here as the prevention guru. I know, I keep doing that. So I'm going to ask you, what have you seen in the last year in terms of prevention and how receptive people are to that?
Right. Well, in terms of prevention over the past year with COVID, we're seeing very little of it. Child sexual abuse and child sexual abuse prevention is difficult to talk about under the best of circumstances. And this year was far from the best of circumstances. So what we've seen is that, these families, the parents and these teachers who are families and the youth workers who are also part of families, they've been really focusing on the crisis or the challenge at hand. I mean, most people were in survival mode. And so there really wasn't much left to focus on child sexual abuse prevention. And that's actually going to be our challenge as our communities start opening up, is to make sure that we're really intentional about those conversations and bring the prevention conversations back into our families, back into our friends circle, our communities, our youth groups, our sports teams, because it won't happen naturally. So we've got to be really intentional and determined about it.
Yeah. I know in the last year that the people that are set before you on this panel and their teams and their employees have worked extremely hard to change the mode of how they do things, all while protecting children. So, Mr. Eastwood, what impact did COVID have on your office and your services?
Like most anyone else in this community, during this pandemic, we had to make various changes to how we operate, whether it's allowing more people to work from home more often, masks and social distancing. We took all those precautions, but one thing is it showed us we needed to expand our technology so we could communicate better in this world when we didn't have the ability to do face-to-face. In a perfect world, I think, as was it Toby or someone said earlier, nothing takes the place of being face-to-face, right? Having that interaction face-to-face. I think it was Lynette maybe that said that. And being face-to-face is something that we all need to, from a criminal justice standpoint, having that personal interaction with the victim, nothing replaces that. However, we were able to bridge the gap through the grants from the REMC in conjunction with Sylvia's CAC to get remote systems in our office so we could talk one-on-one with victims, where they simply could just be on their phone and we could have remote meetings. Court now there's more opportunities to do that remotely, which can be a very good thing for a juvenile. We now have the ability with our remote systems where we can do some things remotely with court. So for the juveniles, so that's been a plus for us, but it's also been a learning curve. Just like anything else, you have to roll with it, and we've tried to do the best we could.
Okay. Ms. Harding, I'm going to ask you the same question, but yours is much bigger because your employment base is much bigger than just like an office, like the prosecutor's office. So what did the state and then locally Boone do to work with COVID?
So similar to other agencies, we did have to adopt and offer virtual services when possible. We still did see children face-to-face when there was a safety concern, an allegation of child abuse and neglect. So our child safety, or maintaining and ensuring child safety, was not compromised. And even with stringent protocols in place, our court did remain open. We were able to maintain our hearings for our families in order to move those cases along. And in the process, we were able to leverage our technology to connect with our children and families. So there was a time when we weren't doing face-to-face visits on our cases, but we were able to, all of our cases, able to utilize virtual contact with our kids to maintain that relationship with our kids. And then we also saw that our participation in our CFTMs, and Becky might agree, and then our meetings, the participation increased because more individuals, whether the families formal and informal supports, were able to attend those meetings with our staff and with the families. We also help families utilize digital means to connect with their kids. Early on in the pandemic, we didn't have face-to-face visits between parents and children. We were able to assist parents with maintaining that virtual contact with their children, but in the summertime of last year, those face-to-face visits did resume for our families. And then regarding the ongoing safety and well-being for our staff, we added screening questions for our hotline intake process to ensure the workers were prepared if someone was suffering from COVID-19 in the home, just so they had that knowledge. And then we also ensured to distribute PPE to all of our staff so they could feel safe while in the field and at the office.
Thank you. Ms. McClure, did you have any trends or changes over the last year that you had to do in your office to accommodate the kids?
To accommodate the kids and volunteers. We continued training new volunteers all the way through COVID, which has always been an in-person process, and we took it completely virtual so that we could keep training new people. And we trained, I think, 15 new volunteers last year, which, when you think about the enormity of what it was, that's a large number. We distributed a lot of PPE both to families and our clients, other people. I took a lot to DCS, my volunteers. One of the things I did find we needed to do is I had a lot of phone calls from foster parents and children that might be placed in their home with their families still. As soon as school closed, they needed school supplies. because they didn't send all that home because the school wasn't prepared. They thought it'd be 2 weeks. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, okay, this is just like the beginning of the school year, and I'm out buying crayons and anything I can find to make complete school supply packages for these kids so that they can continue with their work.
And it sounds like, when talking to Mr. Eastwood, Ms. Harding, and Ms. McClure, that we've done a lot to pivot and try to continue our services and do it in a virtual world. And sometimes as directors and things like that, we have to focus on those things. But I'm going to ask you, Ms. Clark, how did this affect our kids?
I think it had a substantial impact on the kids, as I kind of alluded to earlier, especially our teens, who social interaction is a huge support for them. And just having to decrease that quite a bit, if not altogether. And we had an impact, I would say, or an increase in hospitalizations over this last year for both youth and adults. But I've noticed that there is a lot less safety planning that we're able to do because of the severity of the crises that we're dealing with. And no doubt, I think that just the adjustment, the going back and forth between quarantine, not quarantine, some kids have expressed having experienced that like 6 and 7 times, and so that's several days at one time. It just really is a hard adjustment for anyone, let alone our youth. So they are resilient, and I think that that it can be, as we continue to work together and address these needs and adapt more and adjust. I'm confident that they'll rebound from it, but it's no doubt a hard time, and I don't think that it's we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so we still have a ways, who knows how long to go, but now we're a little better prepared.
Speaking of being still in the middle of a pandemic, everyone is starting to get their vaccinations and things are starting to lighten on masks and things, which some people may agree, some people may not. That's okay. But Ms. Stark, what are some ways that we can protect our children, especially going into the spring-summer month and sports starting back up and all the things? And everybody is so ready to get back out there after being quarantined for a year. What are some ways that we can remember that we protect them?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would say there's 2 main things that parents, guardians, foster parents could be doing to protect their kids' abuse prevention. 1 is ask questions, and 2 is talk to their kiddos. And I'll be referring to, because it's April Child Abuse Prevention Month, we've been putting together various trainings. So the trainings that I'm about to talk about are the links are in the comments section. But, I bet there's not a single parent or guardian or foster parent out there, as our kids are starting to reintegrate, who won't have any problem asking, are masks mandatory or advised? Has the staff been vaccinated or not? Even what time is snack being served? These are questions that I think just about every parent is very comfortable asking. But I remember when my kids were little ones and I had to shift the conversation over to their youth protection policies and procedures, specifically the abuse prevention policies and procedures. It can get really uncomfortable. And the fact of the matter is, we're the adult. And our discomfort, and I say that in solidarity and I say that in understanding, because I don't know that I ever got comfortable with the conversation, but our discomfort does not matter. And so while we're asking the important questions about masks and vaccines and so on and so forth, we also have to keep our eye on the abuse prevention ball. And parents need to be asking about one-on-one policies, which is interactions that are not visible, not interruptible. 80% of child sexual abuse happens in one-on-one situations. So parents need to be asking about that. They need to be asking, are organizations doing things more than background checks in their hiring? These are all really important questions. And there is a training that has already been done, and the link is in the comment sections, that really breaks out 5 key questions that parents must ask any of the sports teams and youth organization that their kids are participating in. And the second thing is talking to their kids about body safety. And, that's another one where the discomfort we feel as adults is far more than the discomfort that kids feel. I mean, this is not having that conversation is really our issue as an adult. But we need to be talking to kids of all ages on an ongoing basis that their bodies belong to them. They are absolutely allowed to stop any touches that make them uncomfortable or icky. Abuse is never their fault, and to tell a safe adult. And there's actually a program coming up on Thursday, April 15th, I'm doing in partnership with the Cass County CASA and their abuse prevention community. And I'm going to work with parents and help them break down the conversation, the age-appropriate language, because this is a conversation that's relevant at 6, at 16, and I'd even push to say at 26 and so on. So I encourage parents to please step out of their discomfort and ask the right questions and have the conversations they need to be having.
That's great advice for parents. Speaking of parents, what advice would you give to parents, Mr. Eastwood, as these kiddos start entering summer and spring and sports and out and about?
Well, when I talk about the advice that I give, I'm not speaking just as a prosecutor, I'm speaking as a parent myself. I have 3 boys between 7 and 12. And I've listened to people like Toby speak before, and I've been to all these things, and you listen, and you've just got to do it as a parent. And first and foremost, you've got to be open with your children and pay attention. I know it's hard. It's hard for me. It's hard for my wife. Long days work, baseball practice. By the time you get home, it's 7 o'clock. You're trying to rush dinner, get them showered into bed. But as a parent, the most important thing is listening and making sure that your children understand that they can come to you whenever they want, and fostering that type of relationship with the person that you're of your child, or if you're the caregiver, because you'll be surprised at the times when they do come to you, and just to be truthful. We've had those difficult conversations in my household. Luckily, my wife has pushed those. Sometimes it's even uncomfortable for me. I'm a prosecutor, and I've prosecuted cases talking about certain things that we've talked about, and it's still uncomfortable for me. So it's not just, when I say it's not just you, it's, all of us who are parents have felt this. And the main thing I always tell people is not only just to listen, but also be aware. I know how important, or I know there are times when you just want your kids to go play on their video game. Go downstairs and play on that video game so you don't have to deal with, the boys fighting, right? But at the same time, listen. You can hear things. You don't necessarily have to be, they don't have to be talking to you. They can be talking to a friend, they can be talking to their brother or their sister or somebody else, but listen. Those are the 2 main things I would say as a parent.
Thank you. Ms. McClure, I'll ask you the same question. What advice would you give parents going into the spring summer month?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was at a parent-teacher conference where we were meeting as like the whole classroom, and the teacher told us to look around and meet these parents, because these are the parents of the kids that your children hang out with, and the importance of knowing the people where your children are. It's okay to be that mom or dad that calls and checks on their child during the day. It's okay to say, I don't know that parent, so I'm going to call them and I'm going to, double check and make sure it's really okay for you to come over and play. Because we do live in a world where we don't know as many people as we used to. Lebanon used to be smaller, Boone County was smaller. I didn't live here for 20 years, moved back and had to take my daughter to a house to study, and I'm like, that address doesn't exist. And she's like, it does, but it was a whole new subdivision that had come up since I had been around in Lebanon. And it's just, having moved back into the community, I found it really important to, as a parent, get to know her friends, get to know her friends' parents, so that they know that your house is a trusted house to come to. And it really is okay to be the parent that kind of bugs them about these things, and it's okay to have the rules. It's okay to say, no, you're not going to do that. It really is. It's not always the easiest. Being a parent, there's nothing easy about, but if you have a bad gut feeling about it, it's okay to say no.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, what are some of the tools that we can give parents and caregivers to address some of the mental health needs and make sure they're okay this summer?
Well, I think it goes along with what many of these folks have already kind of stated, which is just being aware of changes in your child and behavior. So we're looking at, if things have changed from a functioning standpoint, then you maybe start to be concerned from a mental health aspect, like if excessive worry or excessive sleep or eating habits have changed, harm to themselves, of course, would be a red flag. So these things are things to watch out for, and those would be the times to reach out for help. But in the meantime, some things as simple as just listening is super important. Even if you don't know the answers, I think as adults we want to fix, and especially for our kids, but with this pandemic, there's been many unknown answers. And so I think that just instead of saying things like to a child who may be worrying, for example, not saying don't worry, because for them they are worrying, maybe instead say, can you tell me about your worries? And just ways to engage your child and know and have discussions to just show that empathy and support as a parent. I think it will go a long way.
Thank you. Ms. Stark, this last year a lot of us have sat at home and watched Netflix and watched a million documentaries, and some were good and some not so good. But there was a theme a lot to the documentaries this year. The USA Gymnastics, Athlete A, things like that were in the news a lot. So what are some of the most valuable lessons we've learned over the last few years in regards to these bigger cases?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I really, because here's what's going on. These lessons are standing in front of us, and they're shouting, and they're waving their arms frantically, and they're shouting some more, and we're not paying attention. We're giving those lessons like the side eye, like we know they're there, but we're not really going to acknowledge that those lessons are there. And that is dangerous. But not only do we have these large lessons like USA Gymnastics or Jerry Sandusky and Penn State, we have examples in our backyard that we are seeing on the news probably on a weekly basis. This coach, that teacher, that neighbor, this parent, step parent. We see this happening in our communities, but we still have a hard time getting our head around the fact that this isn't somebody else's problem. This is our problem. And, the reasons why I continue to hear people say this isn't something that affects our community, our sports team, our religious institution. I still hear that. And the answer that's always related to that is because of their reputation, because of how much they have devoted, because of how highly they are thought of, because of their wealth. And, when the statistics are, and this is going to be a little startling, but 1 in 10 children are sexually abused by their 18th birthday. And 90% of those kids are abused by someone they know, love, and trust. And so when those statistics are our reality, we don't have the statistical luxury of making the presumption that these things do not impact our community. And listen, I know that it's hard and almost painful to get our head around those statistics, that we and our children could be interacting with people who mean harm to children. But those are the facts. That's no one's opinion. And so I think the biggest lesson is if we as a society and a community would stop giving those lessons the side eye, and knowing that they're there, but pretending like we're not going to pay attention, and just turn your head and look them in the eye, and let's do the things that we need to do. It's painful and it's uncomfortable, but we have to do it.
We do. Thank you very much. And in light of this last year and this pandemic, I do want to thank everybody on this panel and everybody that's watching that has worked with children over the last year and done your job with this pandemic on your back the entire time. You guys have done a fabulous job. I am very privileged and humbled to work here in Boone County. I think everyone has the best interest of children at heart. So I want to close by giving each of you the opportunity to tell this community how they can help your particular offices or your particular cause. And so we'll just start with Mr. Eastwood and move on down.
Well, I think I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of this repetition here, but the most important thing to do is if you see something, to say something. Can't tell you how many times when that hasn't happened. We need to be intentional with what we do. And the only way my office or the Boone County Prosecutor's Office can be successful is if abuse comes to light. And if we believe our children and we take it seriously. Too many times I think people have just, said, oh, you didn't understand what happened. Or they don't really listen and pay attention. So the most important things are doing the things that we've all talked about today. But for this office to be successful and to help protect our children, the most important thing is to bring it to the authorities and then to help support the children and the people that come forward. I can't just sometimes once in a while go into social media and see how many people have negative comments about cases where someone has come forward and they might say something about the victim. And you can understand why people don't want to come forward. We've had some very high-profile cases in Boone County in the last few years when it comes to child abuse and sexual abuse. And the strength that those children showed, those children showed more strength than most adults show. And that's what needs to be applauded. That's what needs to be rewarded. That's what needs to be, that light needs to be shown on that. And so I think that's really what the message I'd like to get out.
Thank you. Ms. Harding?
First thing is that even though DCS works to protect our children and to help our families, we cannot do this alone. We definitely need the assistance of the community, and we depend on our communities to join us in the fight to prevent child abuse and neglect. However, if you have any concerns, allegations of abuse or neglect, please do not hesitate to call the Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline. Even if you think you don't know what the outcome will be, we would rather assess, a report if it meets the criteria than have a child be at risk. So please know the 800 number is 1-800-800-5556, just to make sure that we are addressing those needs in our community, addressing child abuse and neglect. And it's very important, as people mentioned before, to reach out to our parents and to offer that support. We've seen COVID-19 impact families in ways that may not be so obvious to the community, but then child abuse and neglect can happen to any family. So make sure that we're reaching out to our parents, to others in our community to offer that support. And then more often than not, abuse and neglect is born out of an unmet need within a family, and that as a community, we must come together to recognize those needs and connect people to those, connect people who are struggling to those community resources. It's really important for our community to learn and be educated on our community resources, on our prevention programs, because really those are vital to minimizing the allegations of child abuse and neglect later on when we're able to support and help our prevention programs in our community. As DCS, our relationships with our community partners has grown during the pandemic. We're working cooperatively to meet the needs of our children and families. So make sure that you're learning about those programs. One of those is the community partners through the Children's Bureau, because they've been vital in meeting some concrete and physical needs of our families during the pandemic, when they can provide that ongoing support when DCS closes an assessment or a case. And then we do continue to maintain, as an agency, our commitment in addressing child safety and family needs. I mentioned the hotline before. It's open 24 hours, 7 days a week. And even though we are one piece in addressing the needs of our community, we look forward to working with our community partners and continuing to do that work in 2021.
Thank you. Ms. Stark, I'll ask you the same question.
Well, the first, I'd like to answer it in two parts, if
Okay.
I may, but I will still be cognizant of our time limit. The first thing is I hope that the adults, the parents, the guardians, the caregivers that are in the audience and that are watching will take advantage of the educational resources being offered to them on child sexual abuse prevention and response. Because look, we don't know what we don't know. And in the comments section, there's going to be several links for trainings, for information, for education. And let's get that conversation going again. Let's turn up the volume and avail ourselves of the resources. But I also want to, if I may, take this conversation out of the theoretical. You know, we've all sort of been talking about children and families and parents. And I suspect that many of us in this room and many of us watching on YouTube have felt the pain of not having a voice, not being heard, have felt the pain of feeling like something is wrong with them, that they are broken, that things are their fault. And that sucks, and that sucks for a long time. And here's the simplicity of it all. It does not have to be that way. We, as the adults, truly have the power and can gain the skills to make sure that that's not happening to our kids. And it doesn't matter. It could be a small thing, it could be a big thing, but if everybody does a little something, then it becomes a big something. We're doing it together, and then it becomes everything. So that's what I'd like to leave with folks.
Thank you. And I agree that a little something will do a long way. Lynette, or Ms. Clark, I'm sorry. Same question. How can our community help with the youth that are struggling?
Well, I think from a mental health and addiction perspective, that can sometimes be a little overwhelming and challenging to navigate. Sadly, we still face a lot of stigma for mental health and addiction needs. And I just want to make sure people are aware that it is actually a very common challenge that people go through. There, statistically, 1 in 5 people in America have a mental health or addiction need. And so it's more common than we probably think about from the day-to-day basis. So when that need arises, I think there's still hesitation that somebody feels like this is a point of weakness. And it's not. And it's not in our youth. And if they need that support, I just encourage you to reach out. And even if it's not related to mental health or addiction, if it's any need that you're having, I kind of would like to just echo everyone that's spoken today about how much we do support our youth and our families and the community. And if you reach out to anybody that's up here or that's not even up here, that's a resource, they will connect you to the right place. We all work very closely together, and that is one of the things about still being kind of a smaller community. We know one another pretty well and work together on a day-to-day basis. So just keeping that in mind, no matter what the need is, that one of us will point you in the right direction.
Ms. McClure?
Well, mine's very easy. It's www.casaboone.com. Our volunteer application is all online. You fill it out, it comes straight to me. We do virtual training, so training at this point in time is ongoing at all times. We used to wait till we had, 5 or 6 to have a big class, and now we've discovered that it's much easier this way and more financially responsible. So we do that, and there are groups you can, if that's not your thing, there are groups that are working with the children that you can financially support. You can financially support Sylvia's Place. You can financially support the incoming Isaiah House. You can donate to Prevent Child Abuse of Boone County. There are lots of different groups that, use the money to go back into educating children and adults about safety and, signs of neglect and abuse. And we go out and we speak to schools, or we can speak to groups about what can you look for. And I think, like Lynette said, you can reach out to any of us. We all talk and are on email with each other daily, and we would gladly point you in the correct direction.
Thank you very much. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight and speaking about the different aspects of everything that's going on. All of your information will be posted in the comment section of this YouTube video. If you want to get on any of the websites that are associated with the panel members, they will be on there, as well as emails to some of the panel members. But again, I would like to thank you. Thank you so much. I think the biggest takeaway from tonight is if you see something, say something, and it is okay to ask for help. It's okay. So, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.